This is Rhett Read Podcast.
We take a deep dive into the Fear Street series
And review other books we've read.
I'm Serge.
And I'm Anna.
We're happy you can join us.
Hey there, Rhett Readers.
Welcome back to another exciting episode of Rhett Read Podcast. I think we read some books recently. Maybe we want to discuss first before we get into our review of
Fear Street, the Mind Reader.
Yeah, exciting, right, guys? Can I just preface the whole episode by saying this book was so exciting that we ended up taking a whole month off from recording because we were just so stoked.
I think we took like 3 months off.
Yeah, well, sometimes you need a vacation. What can I say?
Well, I guess in the interim, I read a couple of books. The podcast-friendly book I could probably talk about is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I first heard about this book during BookCon of this year, 2019. And I heard about it because BookCon is notorious for ARC drops and book drops and publishers hiding books all over the place or like secret codes, and you run to the table and scream the code and you get a book.
And then all the people next to you hear the secret code and go like, yep, I know the secret code too.
And scream it, and everyone's pushing and shoving. Some publishers are worse about it than others. So when I was in line for V. Schwab's autograph, I heard a story about how Red, White, and Royal Blue was like the book that people wanted. Even though it had already come out by the time BookCon was happening, it was so intense that this dude who really wanted this book, like a grown-ass man, tried to get a copy of this book and he didn't get it. So then he punched a young girl in the head to try to get her copy that she got. And obviously he was like removed from the con.
Yeah.
And if you're removed from BookCon, which is a Read Pop event, you're no longer allowed to attend any Read Pop event, which is like any MCMs or C2E2 or New York Comic Con, etc., etc. Like a bunch of conventions all around the world you are no longer able to go to because you couldn't get your hands on this one book that was already out.
What, did he get the book?
I don't think so. It's a bit extreme, people. No book is worth that.
Or was it? Let's find out. Anna, what did you think of the book?
I looked it up, and I wanted to know more about the book, and I thought it was sort of like a YA book, but it's actually new adult. And like, everyone's been talking about the death of new adult, and how publishers are just marketing things as YA willy-nilly, even though, a lot of their YA books could actually be new adult, but they're too scared to make it. This is firmly a new adult book. And as part of that joy revolution that you had talked about from the LGBTQIA plus panels at Book Expo, it's a very, very joyful book, especially for these times. It's about the first female president. She was elected in 2016. She has a biracial family, and the first children are like hardworking. They're interested in helping like the American people in any way they can, and they just want like what's best for, the citizens. People value competency over divisiveness. It's one of those really hopeful fantasy dreams that people have nowadays. And actually what's interesting is this author dreamt up the book in early 2016. And then she was like, yeah, no one wants to read a book like this. And then she put it on the shelf until November 2016. And then she just started writing it feverishly because she needed an outlet for what she was feeling. And honestly, there's a lot in this book that doesn't hold up to realism and what happens. And part of me feels like I felt that way because society itself can just be really shitty at times towards other people. Like, people can just be shitty to each other. And I think the expectation of shittiness that you expect from normal everyday interactions that doesn't happen in this book makes it almost like fantastical and unbelievable. And I feel like that's kind of sad. But even if it is fantasy to some degree, when reality is not really something that you want to engage with, it's a nice fantasy to live in, even though it's like a real world fantasy type thing, you know what I mean?
Right.
I personally liked it. I mean, I can see that it's like very unrealistic because of all the things I had mentioned previously that just does not seem real. But at the same time, it's...
Right, so, because in real society, people hate each other. And here everybody's like, yay.
Right? So on top of the first woman elected president, the book is actually about her son. And, when the book starts, he seems to like really, truly hate the young prince. His older brother is obviously supposed to be Prince William, and This character is obviously supposed to be Prince Harry. I think his name is Henry, actually. Yeah, his name is Henry.
Very original, yeah.
Yes, Prince Henry, through the course of their interactions together, basically starts this, like, international incident. And it's to the point where, like, both sides need to do damage control, and they have to pretend to be friends. But as they pretend to be friends, the first son realizes that he's actually bi, and he didn't know that. And Prince Henry is gay. It becomes this whole thing, and now they have to hide their relationship. And obviously, that's not going to happen because it's the first.
Is there like a Love
son.
Actually moment where they're like kissing at the pageant and then the curtain comes up and like everybody sees them?
No. Alex, who is the first son, and Henry are interesting characters, and you kind of cheer for their relationship.
Well, what if you're like me and you're kind of, the down with the monarchy, down with the aristocracy type? Do you think like somebody like me would still be able to enjoy this book?
Well, Prince Henry is not a fan of the monarchy either, and this is where my issues with the book come into play, because I am also not a royalist, and I felt that Henry's character was kind of weakly written to begin with. But he has this whole, like, hand-wringing thing about, like, being part of the monarchy, but, like, colonialism ruined so many other countries, and we have so much blood money, and I don't want to be part of it. I'll just live off the stuff from my father's acting career, and I don't want any of my monarchy money, and I felt like it was really eye-rolling and just full of privilege. And first of all, he's fourth in line for the throne, and that's only if his older brother doesn't have any children.
Right.
So he's going to be pushed down that line of succession pretty quickly. If real-life Prince Harry can move past, like, all of his scandals and, like, be perfectly fine, I feel like a lot of what Henry was, like, upset about, he had really no reason to be upset about. He goes high and mighty about the monarchy and the evilness of the monarchy and all the things they have done, and he wants no part of it. Well, instead of all the bitching and moaning that he was doing, he could have done some real things that benefited the people that he wanted to help. And, like, use his monarchy money and just given it back to the people that he wanted to help. You know, you could say that he should do all these different things and, you know, he should sacrifice his position, abdicate or whatever, even though he's not even in a position to abdicate, because the whole Joy Revolution means that he shouldn't have to sacrifice anything for his love. That fits that perfectly, but because I felt like the character wasn't developed enough, it was just really lacking something. Like, he doesn't need to sacrifice anything, but at least give him more character and, like, give you more feeling of, like, why he feels the way he does, instead of just, like, saying all the things that people who aren't royalists are thinking. Mm-hmm. Like, there needs to be more to that character. I thought the character of Alex, who was the first son, was actually pretty well written, but I have to say this book is only good if you have a specific political point of view. I've read the reviews of this on Goodreads, and some people fault it for having too much politics or the politics of it. And first of all, I didn't think there was too much politics at all, but at the same time, you know, people are faulting the politics of it. Alex, like I said, is biracial, and his mom is the first female president, and his father is Hispanic. They are liberals. They're very progressive, and they have a very progressive agenda, and they talk about that progressive agenda, and they kind of don't agree with what the person running against his mother believes, and they make it very clear where they stand politically. And if you do not side with that side of the politics, you might find the book less enjoyable.
Sure.
I can see that.
I have a question, though. I mean, if you're already reading some kind of gay YA literature...
It's not YA, it's new adult.
Okay. You see where I'm going with this. Politically, how conservative are you at that point?
I don't want to get political, but I will say that you can be bi, you can be gay, and you can still have conservative beliefs. There is a bit of hypocrisy there, but I don't want to get into that discussion in any way, shape, or form.
Okay.
That's how I feel about it. I will say that I do know that people have been upset by the political ideology, and if that's how you feel, maybe don't read the book, because you're just going to be upset by that, despite the fact that it is the Joy Revolution.
Sure.
I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It's fun. It's not realistic at all. Don't strain your brain trying to nitpick things and saying that would never happen. That's not believable, because you're right. It's not. It's a fun fantasy.
Is it like sugar? Is it like cotton candy?
With a lot of smut. There is a lot of sexy time.
Right after this short intermission, we will come back with our review of Fear Street the Mind Reader. Yeah, exciting times. Finally get to review Fear Street the Mind Reader, and as always, let's begin with our prediction accuracy. I predicted that there's going to be a girl that can read minds. That seems fairly obvious from the cover of the book and the title, right? She finds out that everyone is thinking mean thoughts about her, and she feels like she's being bullied. Except if you think about it, she's not really being bullied, right? These are just people's thoughts. So, even though these kids don't know they're bullying her, to her it feels like they are. She thinks they're all evil, and finally snaps, goes crazy, and starts to kill all the other kids one by one. Murderer female, murder weapon various. She's going to set up elaborate Rube Goldberg-like apparati to make it seem like an accident. The murder victim will be a bunch of mean girls, and maybe one guy as well.
You know, that's actually a great prediction. It's 100% wrong, but it's great.
Yeah, sadly, even the part about there being a mind reader is wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my prediction is a girl moves on to Fear Street and somehow sharpens some psychic abilities. She somehow ends up reading the mind of a murdered ghost or spirit and is now in danger from either whomever murdered the dead girl or from the ghost herself. I said the murder weapon was a knife, the murderer was a male, and the victim was a female.
Yeah. Okay, that was pretty close, actually.
Yeah.
You didn't even predict a mind reader.
I said psychic abilities.
Oh my god.
Well, no, I said she somehow ended up reading the mind of a murdered ghost. So I did say mind reader.
I know, but that's pretty close. I don't know, man. I think you're cheating, but anyway, let's just jump right to the plot synopsis.
Ellie moves to Shadyside, hoping for a fresh start after her prophetic visions ended her relationship with both her boyfriend and her best friend in one fell swoop. Unfortunately for her, her visions have started up again, and after a dead body turns up, her life might depend on figuring out what they all mean.
We have an interesting cast of characters here. First of all, we have Ellie Anderson. She's the main character, and she has long blonde hair. She's born in Shadyside, but left when she was 2 years old to live with her grandparents after her mother's untimely death. Now she's 16, and her father's sales job has brought them back to Shadyside. It's her senior year of high school.
And then we have Chaz, the big black lab of the Anderson household. He's an all-around good boy.
Good boy.
Good boy, Chaz. Good boy.
Next up, we have Sarah Wilkins. She's Ellie's new best friend. She has short, sleek black hair, dramatic brown eyes, olive skin, a sarcastic sense of humor, and she works at Alma's coffee shop. She became good friends since Ellie moved to town, and her mother isn't around and her sister disappeared. Her father is a lieutenant in the police force and has no sense of humor.
Next up you have the hot guy, Brian Tanner. He has dark eyes, reddish-brown hair, tousled on the top and short on the sides.
This episode is brought to you by Shadyside Psychics. Use promo code RENTREAD for a free reading today.
Alright, so let's get into the in-depth plot. It's gonna take a while. There's a lot of plot. The book starts with Ellie hanging out at Alma's while Sarah's working, distracting her from her work. They chat about some of their classmates who are at the cafe, and then all of a sudden, the hot guy comes in, and it's Brian Tanner.
The girls are blown away by him. He moves with a confidence that high school boys don't have. Sarah goes to serve him and finds out his name.
Ellie can feel Brian checking her out, so she does the reasonable, rational thing and runs out of the cafe because she's so nervous.
Yep, apparently she's like an anime girl or something.
Rory Gilmore kind of does that to Dean a few times in Gilmore Girls, so I don't know, maybe that's just how people think girls are. I don't know. It's not.
Ellie goes home and gets her dog Chaz for an off-leash walk.
We emphasize off-leash because we can never take our dog off-leash. He would just run away.
We can't trust him. Their walk takes them to Fear Street, and Chaz ends up chasing a squirrel into the woods. The Fear Street woods. As Ellie chases after Chaz, she starts thinking about her ex-boyfriend and her visions.
She thinks about how she could see what her grandmother was making for dinner beforehand, or know when her grandfather was going to town.
She once had a vision of her Cocker Spaniel, Jake, being hit by a car, and that's when her visions really stopped being fun.
She had a vision of her ex-boyfriend Tommy kissing her best friend Janine, and it was so powerful that she had to confront them about it. And when she did, they denied it.
So then she kept confronting them. Tommy ended up breaking up with her. Janine ended up telling her that she was crazy and ended their friendship.
So after this, Ellie decided that she was never going to use her powers again, and she'd never get close to anyone ever again.
Chaz's barking snaps Ellie back into reality, and she notices that Chaz has a huge bone in his mouth.
Just like a good boy should.
Yeah, he drops the bone at her feet, and then runs further into the woods, and he starts howling.
Ellie runs after him and sees that he's dug a hole, and he's howling and refusing to leave the hole that he's dug.
He's so proud of his hole. When Ellie looks into the hole, she sees what's left of a human hand.
Ellie runs onto Fear Street, and the classmates who are at the diner actually happen to be driving by in their blue Geo. So she, hails them and pulls them over and gets them to drive her and Chaz to the police station.
Sergeant Fraser at the police station hears them out, and after double-checking that she's not faking the story, sends her over to Lieutenant Wilkins, who just happens to be Sarah's father.
He kind of recognizes Ellie, and he listens to her story and decides to go right back to the woods with a couple of officers, Officer Barnett and Officer Jackson, to go check out what she's talking about. It's now completely dark, and they have to use their flashlights.
After a fair bit of searching, and right as the cops are starting to get bored, Ellie manages to find the shallow grave once again. Chaz seems to be much less helpful this time around.
As soon as Wilkins sees the grave, he actually drops to his knees in front of it and orders one of his officers to run back to the car and radio for the crime scene techs.
For whatever reason, Ellie is allowed to stick around, and in the meantime, a bunch of other kids from school show up and starts crowding around the unmarked grave in the middle of the woods. Totally realistic, right?
So Sarah comes over to talk to Ellie because her shift is over, and why not join the crowd on Fear Street? Whatever. She tries to crack some jokes to make Ellie feel better, but she seems kind of nervous herself.
Ellie also notices Brian Tanner hanging around, a little apart from the rest of the crowd. As everyone looks on, the crime tech uncovers some red fabric inside the grave. Sarah sees it and faints, while making contact with her dad. The next day in school, Sarah isn't in any of her classes, and rumors are flying wild.
Ellie actually finds out that Sarah used to have a sister called Melinda, who disappeared before Ellie moved to Shadyside.
She surmises that the body must be Melinda's, and Melinda must have reached across the void to make contact with Ellie, and that's how, she was able to find that shitty, shallow grave with Melinda's body.
It's an interesting leap of logic there.
At her after-school job at the library, Ellie bumps into Brian Tanner. Again, who at this point is definitely bordering on stalker territory. He actually calls her by her name and starts chatting her up.
He asks for help finding a book called Primitive Weapons, but it's obviously just an excuse to chat Ellie up.
This is not obvious to Ellie, as she expertly utilizes her knowledge of the Dewey Decimal System and goes to the 600s section. As Ellie pulls the book off the shelf, in its place, she sees a bloody silver-handled dagger. The knife slides out, pointing straight at her heart.
This makes her stumble back and scream, but it's not actually a dagger. It's just a vision.
And as they say in The Matrix, there is no knife.
I see you've played Knifey Spoony before.
After giving Brian the book, she makes a quick excuse and runs to the back office. She can't believe it. The visions are happening again. But what does it mean?
She begins to convince herself it's just because Brian asked for the Primitive Weapons book, until she realizes one little fact that she had overlooked earlier. How did Brian know her name?
Before going home from work, Ellie stops by Sarah's house to see if she's okay. No one answers the door, so she tries yelling at the window that's cracked open a bit. Sarah, are you there?
No answer.
She's about to walk away. She sees a ghostly skeletal apparition in the window. She runs back and pounds on the door and calls out for Sarah again, but again no one answers.
But now we have a second vision that's appeared in only so many hours, right? First you have the bloody knife in the library, and now you have a grinning skull. What does this mean? Is someone going to die?
I don't know, but this got Ellie all worried. Ellie's thinking about all this as she's walking to Alma's to see if maybe Sarah's at her job, when Hoopa Brian rolls up in a black Jeep and offers her a ride.
Ellie rightfully refuses to get in the Jeep and asks him how he knew her name. First he lies and he says, well, he heard the librarian call her that. And Ellie's like, no. And then he's like, oh, Sarah told me. And she's like, why didn't you just say that to begin with? If he lied the first time, what makes you think his second thing is true?
Right.
Come on,
A bunch of BS, right? So Alma's is right up ahead anyway. So she decides she's just going to run there to get away from this creep. Once she's at Alma's, she begins chatting with Ernie, the 40-something proprietor. Apparently, Sarah never made it to work today, even though she's never missed a day of work all year.
So just as Ellie is about to pump Ernie for more information about Sarah's sister, Brian joins her at the counter because creepy.
Yeah. Somehow she ends up getting burgers with him and spends half an hour just chatting and having a good time. Just as he's suggesting he can take her home in his Jeep, Lieutenant Wilkins walks in to tell Ernie that Sarah needs to take off from work for a couple of weeks.
So then Brian does the least suspicious thing ever. He throws money down, runs out of the diner as soon as he sees Wilkins come in. Wilkins doesn't notice that. Ellie doesn't think, I wonder why he did that.
Yeah, why is he running from the cops? But anyway, once Ellie gets home, she finally has a chance to talk to her dad about everything that's happened over the last couple days. Dad is super unhappy and wants Ellie to not talk to the police and to not get involved. He doesn't want her to end up like her mother.
Her mother?
Wait, what?
Apparently, Ellie never knew that her mom was actually murdered. Fun fact that her dad never told her because she was too young. She was only 2 at the time. And then later, the memory was just too painful for him.
What actually happened is eerily similar to what's going on now. Her mom got involved with the police in order to help solve the case of a little girl who got murdered. She solved the crime, but got herself killed in the process. She actually had the same kind of vision powers that Ellie has.
Mind reading.
And Dad doesn't.
Mind reading.
Yeah. Dad doesn't want to tell Ellie anything more than that. But the memories are just too painful for him right now.
Ellie goes to take a hot shower to process everything she's just learned. And as she's showering, she has a vision of the knife again, and now there's blood everywhere. So she tries to dodge the knife because I guess the vision knife is attacking her. She slips, she falls, and then she hits her head on the tub. She's struggling to her knees, and then she hears what she thinks is maybe her mother's voice crying for help. So she cries out for her mom, but there's no answer, and the voice is gone.
After she leaves the shower, Dad tells her Brian is waiting on the line to speak with her. She tells Dad to tell him she's asleep. Her dad looks like he's been crying. The memory of her mom's death being brought back up again has been tough for both of them.
This has only been day 2. Brian is coming on pretty hard to her. And also, where'd he get her phone number from? Because she hasn't been able to get in contact with Sarah. And so obviously he couldn't get it from Sarah.
Nope.
So, question mark?
It's pretty creepy, right?
Yeah, we'll find out later.
Okay, so now it's Friday, and Sarah is still not at school. The day goes by in a blur, and Ellie rushed to her after-school job. Instead of shelving books, she runs straight to the microfiche machine and looks up her mom's death in the newspaper archive.
Shadyside woman attacked. Stabbed to death, reads the headline she was looking for. Early yesterday morning, a vicious knife attack on Fear Street left Mrs. Louise Anderson of 128 Canyon Road fatally wounded. Town police summoned by a passing motorist were on the scene in minutes, but the woman was already dead. Mrs. Anderson's 2-year-old daughter was found nearby, crying but unharmed, still seated in her stroller. There were no other witnesses.
Yeah, that's pretty brutal.
That's one of the murders in one of the Jackson Brody books, isn't it?
I was just gonna say that's like that stupid Scottish TV show.
It wasn't a Scottish TV show.
It's Nightmare Fuel is what that is. Anyway.
It's a Kate Atkinson book, first of all. As she's reading this, she actually has a vision.
She actually sees her mom getting murdered. It's almost like a flashback to a repressed memory from back when she was 2. And her mother's last dying words are, "I love you," as she looks right at baby Ellie. That's just heartbreaking.
That is really heartbreaking.
That's all there's to say about that. It's pretty messed up.
So after all this, she heads straight to Sarah's house and just lays on the doorbell.
Ding dong 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 dong
Ding.
dong 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 dong.
She knows someone is home because when she called from work, someone picked up, but they didn't say anything. So she eventually decides to go into the house and walks from room to room to room until she finds a figure sprawled on the bed and screams.
This is another bus. This is like, oh my god, there's a dead body, but, obviously Sarah's still alive, and she was just sleeping until she wakes up from all the commotion and asks a very reasonable question.
WTF are you doing in my house?
Ellie stays to comfort Sarah and gets confirmation that it was her sister in the grave she found. Also, her dad's been acting real weird lately, won't come home to the house other than to eat. Also, she doesn't even have an aunt.
Whose
Afterwards,
house she was supposedly at, according to her dad.
Yeah, no, her dad's acting strange, but Sarah becomes tired and goes back to sleep.
So Ellie just resumes wandering around Sarah's house.
Well, now she has, implicit permission at this point.
She ends up wandering into Melinda's room and begins to search for clues.
As she holds up a framed photo of Melinda, it begins to transform. Suddenly, Melinda in the photo is screaming a silent scream of horror. Ellie drops the frame on the ground and the glass shatters.
And then she just runs out of the house as fast as she can after, breaking this picture frame and glass is everywhere. That's really nice, Ellie. Uninvited.
Yeah. No, it wasn't her. It must have been Sarah sleepwalking.
Rude.
Yeah.
We get another R.L. Stine bus as she's chased down the street by someone.
Right, as she's running out of the house, suddenly, she hears footsteps behind her and they're getting closer and closer.
So she trips on nothing and is on the ground, and then she turns around and just utters a single word.
You!
Guess who it is?
Surprise, it's Brian Tanner again.
Who knew? The stalker is stalking her.
Yeah.
Surprise!
He makes a half-assed apology for ditching her at Alma's. He was worried because he parked his Jeep in a no-parking spot and didn't want to get a ticket from the cop who just walked in.
R.L. Stine drops this beautiful little gem of a line here. She wasn't certain about his story, but he sure was cute. She had a sudden impulse to lean forward and kiss him. Yes, R.L. Stine, that's how women think.
You have to remember, this is Friday night. She first laid eyes on him walking into the diner Wednesday night.
And she thought he was a creep earlier that day.
And then only yesterday, he somehow knew her name and phone number and was really going after her hard. But whatever. Anyway, he's asking her out. She's not ready to go on a date with him, because it's only been 2 days since she saw him for the first time. But never want to shirk from stepping up the creeper stalker vibe. Brian asks if it's because of what happened with her ex-boyfriend.
Excuse me?
How does he know about her ex-boyfriend?
So she's trying to figure out, how he knows anything about her ex. And he invites her to go canoeing to Fear Island and go on a picnic on what is forecast to be the last really warm day of autumn.
Well, it turns out he must be like a mind reader or something, because she loves canoeing. And Chaz is invited too. Plus, with it being so late in the season, they'll have the place all to themselves. What could go wrong?
Well, it's Saturday. Time for a canoe paddle and a picnic on Fear Island. Is everyone excited?
I know I am.
I would love to have, Fear Island to canoe out to. That'd be so much fun.
We do have islands we can canoe out to if we want to.
It's not on a lake. You have to battle the waves.
Well, to hear R.L. Stine describe Fear Lake, you can have, hurricane force winds sink entire boats full of a dozen people, so...
That's valid. So, first thing in the morning, Ellie flips on the news. And who's there?
It's Sarah's dad, giving an update on the investigations. He says that Melinda's boyfriend was probably murdered on the same day as her, since they had planned to run away together.
The police department is now treating her death as a homicide, and they're searching for her boyfriend, Brett Hawkins, even though they said he's probably dead, but whatever. They are reported to be using a new computer technology to aid in their search.
Ooh, that's interesting. I wonder what that's all about. But never mind all that. This is supposed to be a fun day. Despite her persistent feelings of dread, whenever she was around him, she fully intended to have fun at this picnic. And he brought fried chicken. Oh boy!
I do like fried chicken.
Yeah, that's a keeper. That man's a keeper. Forget the feelings of dread. Fried chicken trumps all.
Dude, fried chicken, coleslaw, mashed potatoes, gravy.
Don't forget pickles. You gotta have pickles.
Excuse me?
Mac
and cheese, maybe. Pickles?
We're talking all the fixings here.
Are you talking about sliced pickles or a spear or just a whole pickle?
Either or will be fine. Okay, if you're gonna make, let's
I could do with sliced pickles.
Yeah, let's say you're making katsu. You're gonna put the sliced pickles on your katsu, right?
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
After renting a canoe, they share a romantic kiss and proceed to paddle out to the island and have a great picnic in the unseasonably warm weather.
The chicken is nice and greasy, just like Ellie likes it, and they talk for an hour afterwards. How could she ever have been nervous around him?
Because he's creepy, girl. He's creepy. That's why.
Just then, Brian asks if she wants an apple, and Ellie says yes.
Just like Adam and Eve, he quips.
Well, that's a weird thing to say, she thinks, and she's right.
It is very weird.
Yeah.
Who says that?
And then, he pulls out the exact same silver-handled knife that she saw in her vision, and proceeds to start peeling the apple.
This is like in Dark, where the creepy Noah guy has that knife and he's just cutting up the apple to eat. And it's like, you are obviously a villain if that is how you eat an apple. Unless you have a disability, like, why are you doing this?
And that's like a totally like standard like villain thing, right? To like
use a knife to eat an apple like that.
You're always cutting like towards your finger and stuff, and it's like super dangerous and it's like a super sharp. Anyway, Ellie runs away into the woods,
fearing for her own safety because
if you look back on their relationship so far, no, this being day 3 since they met.
It's day 4.
Oh, is it day 4?
It's day 4.
How much of their interactions is her running away from him?
Because she thinks he's creepy.
She runs away from him when they first meet. She runs away from him when he offers her a ride. She runs away from him when she's running out of the house. And now she's running away from him on their first date.
She wavers between thinking he's like really creepy and scary and weird and like just wanting to make out with him.
After a while, and after being comforted by Chaz, she decides she's being silly and goes back to Brian again.
Except he's gone. Picnic is about packed up and there's no sign of the canoe.
Oh shit. Did he leave her stranded on the island? Nope, it's a bus. He packed up the stuff and went solo canoeing to find her because he heard Chaz barking down the shore a bit.
I'm sorry, if you saw her run off, why would you canoe over instead of running into the woods?
Well, he's very considerate. You know, he packed up all the stuff.
Well, you could pack up the stuff and also go into the woods.
And he loaded the canoe.
But you could pack up the stuff and load the canoe and then still go into the woods instead of canoeing around.
She gets in the canoe, and they start paddling back to the shore.
Except she's really embarrassed about running away, and kind of awkwardly gets in the canoe without putting on her life jacket.
She wonders if maybe he's really suspicious of her now. It seems like he might be.
Suspicious of what?
Well, I mean, she did run out as soon as he took his knife out to peel the apple.
Is she worried that he thinks that
she's onto him?
For being a murderer?
Yeah. As her mind spirals into doubt and worry, Brian asks her a question, and like a total spaz, Ellie stands up in the canoe and turns around. Because, you know, she's like startled out of her reverie, so like him asking her...
She just wants to run away.
Yeah, it's like a fight or flight response is triggered.
Anyone has ever been on a canoe and you've tried to stand suddenly, you know exactly what's going to happen.
This is something you don't want to do, especially not with a rapid turning motion, and it is perhaps the only realistic depiction of canoeing from R.L. Stine thus far.
Ellie ends up going overboard, and so does Brian.
As she struggles to come up for air, a hand grabs her from below and tries to drag her down. She struggles free, surfaces, and grabs hold of a canoe. Chaz is still inside, nice and dry. Brian is nowhere to be seen.
So a fisherman who was obviously fishing nearby in a rowboat has seen what has happened, and he is quickly rowing over.
Brian is kind of floating face down a few feet from the canoe, and Ellie manages to flip him over, and he's still breathing. Rafe,
the fisherman, ends up rescuing them.
Brian comes to on shore, and he and Ellie end up making out.
He thanks Ellie for saving him, and then says he was supposed to be the one saving her, which Ellie has no clue what he's talking about. She's confused.
As Brian falls asleep, he murmurs the name, Melinda.
Ellie kind of freaks out because what if he's talking about Melinda Wilkins? What if he's the murderer? Did he freak out because Lieutenant Wilkins recognized him because he's a murderer?
But he's hot, and he likes her, so push these thoughts aside. Let's make out.
I like how she's still wavering between, like, creepy, hot, creepy, hot.
It's like the Death by Snoo Snoo scene from Futurama, where, like, Fry's face alternates between, like, a grin and, like, a look of horror. Ellie goes to see Lieutenant Wilkins later that day because she hasn't been able to reach Sarah.
Lieutenant Wilkins says that Sarah has been too upset to answer the phone. Ellie tries to ask about Brett Hawkins.
Lieutenant Wilkins is a bit shocked by the question. Ellie doesn't know if she should talk about her visions of Brian with the knife, or that she had a vision about his daughter.
Brett has been missing for as long as Melinda has been dead. He was the last to see her alive, as we found out during the press conference. But the name Brian Tanner doesn't ring a bell for Lieutenant Wilkins when Ellie asks. He just shows her a picture of Brett. And guess what?
I guess it looks just like Brian.
It is Brian. So she's staring at the picture.
Maybe it's just his twin. I mean, he's so cute.
So she's staring at the picture, and she has another vision of a silver-handled knife. So Ellie tells Lieutenant Wilkins that she can help solve the case, and she tells him about her visions.
She lets him know that she's had visions of the murder weapon.
He brings her to the woods and has her try to find the knife.
She finds the knife, And Lieutenant Wilkins recognized it as something Brett used to flash around.
Ellie finally tells Wilkins about Brian/Brett, whatever.
She's upset that maybe Brian/Brett didn't actually like her and just wanted to use her to get more information on Sarah.
Wilkins offers to drive Ellie home, but she just wants to walk home. She agrees to let him know if Brian tries to get in touch with her. She just wants to go home.
Yeah, she's so sad 'cause she's like, wait, I thought the fried chicken date was real, but now I don't know. Maybe it was just bribery chicken to get info about Sarah.
As Ellie heads off, she actually hears rustling in the woods, and out jumps Sarah from behind a tree.
Why does Sarah jump out from behind a tree?
Well, she's disheveled and she's in the bathrobe. So, there's that.
Having a bad day. Sarah heard there was a break in the case after calling the police station, and I guess she decided to run right to the crime scene.
Ellie lets Sarah know that Brian Tanner is actually Brett, and Lieutenant Wilkins thinks that Brett killed Melinda.
Sarah panics and starts screaming that Ellie doesn't understand and runs away like a crazy person.
Ellie just can't deal with any more of this shit. She just heads home, and unfortunately for her,
Brian is there waiting for her.
he slams her against the wall and then puts his hand over her mouth.
He asks her why she gave Wilkins the knife and if she actually believes he killed Melinda. What knife did she give to Wilkins?
The knife at the crime scene.
Oh, the actual murder weapon knife.
He admits to her that he's Brett, but he denies killing Melinda, which, someone who has been lying to you for, 4 straight days.
This is his MO. It's like, how'd you know my name? Oh, I looked it up in the thing. There is no thing. Oh, shit, Sarah told me. Yeah.
So he tells her that he and Melinda were planning on leaving Shadyside 2 years ago, and he wants to tell her the story of what happened, but Ellie wants none of that.
Before he can finish his story, Ellie screams that he murdered Melinda and that she didn't want to hear any more lies. Luckily for Ellie, Lieutenant Wilkins just happens to be at the door.
So Wilkins ends up arresting Brett. He showed up because Ellie's neighbor had heard a disturbance and called the police, and as soon as Wilkins heard that it was Ellie's house, he knew it had to be Brett.
Yep. Quick thinking there, Lieutenant Wilkins. Ellie's just happy that everything is finally over.
Later that night, even though, isn't it pretty late already?
Yeah, this has been a long day. I mean, it started out with, fried chicken for breakfast, but,
I would love fried chicken for breakfast.
It's given her a lot of energy to, keep going, because we didn't hear about her having any other meals this day, so it must have been very filling.
So anyways, later that night, Wilkins calls Ellie's house. Brett has run away, and he's out to kill Ellie. They want Ellie to go to the police station.
For her own safety. Wilkins brought Brett to the courthouse to book him, and when he was going to bring him to jail, Brett got out of his cuffs and ran away. So, first of all, nice job with the cuffs, and secondly, what? Anyway, Wilkins fired a couple of shots at Brett, but he got away.
Mr. Anderson refuses to let Ellie go to the police station because she's done enough. He's upset, and he needs to tell her exactly how her mother died.
She had visions about a little girl who was killed, and the man who killed her. She went to the police to let them know, and they arrested the girl's uncle. The police didn't have enough to hold him, so they let him go. The day after the uncle was released, he stabbed Mrs. Anderson repeatedly. Mr. Anderson regrets letting her ever talk to the police, and doesn't want Ellie to go. Well, Ellie says she has an obligation, and she has to go.
Also, isn't she going to be safer at the police station if he's out to get her?
Yeah, I mean, she's already done the thing, right? She's already done the mind vision thing, and she's already, led the guy to get captured, so at this point, you know what I mean?
Anyway, so they go to the police station because, obviously, and Lieutenant Wilkins tries to get Ellie to have a vision so they can figure out where Brett has gone. Dance, puppet, dance.
Yep, he shows her a picture of Brett and Melinda, and the only thing Ellie can see is the color gold.
Well, that's odd. So the Andersons go home without any extra police presence around their house. If they think that Brett is going to go kill her...
Whatever. To make matters worse, Ellie sneaks out of the house anyway to go talk to Sarah in the middle of the night.
Well, something's very wrong in Sarah's house. When Ellie gets there, she hears these weird sounds, and the front door is unlocked. Well, I guess that's par for the course. Their front door is always unlocked. But she goes in, and she finds Sarah in Melinda's room, crying and just smashing it up.
Sarah tells Ellie that she ruined everything, that she stirred everything up after finding the body.
Sarah says that she's the one who killed Melinda. Melinda was so smart and so pretty and so perfect, and Lieutenant Wilkins loved her more than anything and anyone. And even after their mom died, Sarah tried to take over running the house. Her dad still ignored her and preferred her sister. But the one thing her dad didn't approve of in regards to her sister was the boyfriend Brett. And he and Melinda actually got in a huge fight over it.
Melinda wanted to run away with Brett, and Sarah did everything she could to help with the plan, including giving her money and helping lie to their dad. Sarah blames herself for Melinda dying because Brett was obviously a killer, and her helping Melinda leave is what allowed Brett to eventually murder her. Ellie has another vision at this point, a vision of being buried alive and grabbing a round piece of metal.
Well, Sarah shakes her out of the vision, and Ellie tells Sarah about her visions, and Sarah's just like, oh yeah, that explains a lot. I always wondered why you were helping with the investigation. That explains everything.
I mean, at this point, Sarah seems to be, troubled.
I don't know if she's troubled, but I don't know if Occam's razor will just jump right to, you're a mind reader.
She was, in the woods, sneaking behind a tree in her bathrobe, ranting and raving. She's pretty troubled. Ellie says that the visions are telling her that there's something in Melinda's grave that can help catch Brett. Sarah grabs her dad's extra gun, and they head off to the Fear Street woods in the middle of the night. What is it, 3 a.m. again?
They dig around for a bit, and then they finally find a gold button.
It's like a button of a jacket, and it's all gold and stuff, and Brett actually shows up just then, and asks if they found the button.
And then he just starts demanding to see the button. Just keeps asking for it, give it to me, show it to me. And as this is happening, Ellie has a vision of Melinda fighting off whomever is wearing the button.
Sarah sees the button and starts freaking out.
Well, as Sarah's having her, mini meltdown, Ellie just starts questioning Brett about the button. Well, how'd you lose it? Why'd you lose it? What happened? How can you do that to her?
And just then, Lieutenant Wilkins shows up.
Yeah, he says that one of his officers was driving by and saw Ellie and Sarah go into the woods. These police are very good at noticing things but not doing anything about it.
I know, why doesn't this officer go and, help them?
Wilkins points his gun at Brett and tells Sarah and Ellie to go to the car. He doesn't want to hear about this button. He has Brett, and he's ready to, kill Brett. He repeatedly tells Brett that this time he's not getting away, and he needs to pay for his daughter's death, and this is it.
A gunshot echoes through the woods.
Is Brett dead?
I don't know. Turns out, Sarah shot her dad with the spare pistol. It hit his shoulder, and he's down on the ground. She figured it out. She recognized the button. It's from his uniform. The night Melinda disappeared, he seemed to be more worried about the missing button than anything else. He must have been the person who killed Melinda.
Lieutenant Wilkins admits all this, that he's the one who killed her, but it was an accident. He just didn't want her to go with Brett. So they fought about it, he shoved her, and she fell and hurt her head. He made it to look like that she was stabbed, and then buried both Melinda and the knife in the woods.
He tells Brett that Brett ruined everything, killed their family, and deserves to die. He raises his gun to shoot Brett.
Well, he's injured, his shoulder, so obviously his shot misses. And Brett is able to knock the pistol out of Wilkins' hand. And Brett has some gripes of his own. Not only is his girlfriend dead, he's had to be on the run for 2 years, and the past 2 years of his life have just been miserable.
Yep, because, obviously Lieutenant Wilkins has tried to, ruin everything for him. Sarah uses the police radio in her dad's car to call for an ambulance.
And then we fast forward to later that night, or early morning, I guess. Brett and Ellie are chatting in her living room.
He tells Ellie about the night Melinda died. He showed up at her house, and she wasn't there. He ended up driving around for a few hours. When he got home, his mom was freaking out about how Wilkins had gone to the house to arrest him for Melinda's death. He realized that no one would believe him, so he drove off and stayed with relatives, hid out, kept on the move, changed his looks, changed his name.
He came back to Shadyside because he had a vision. He says he's kind of like a mind reader.
He has visions, dreams, only he's wide awake. He had a dream vision of Melinda. She was begging him to help her. Then he saw Ellie in the vision.
He knew he had to go back to Shadyside to find out what happened to Melinda, and also to protect Ellie.
He somehow knew that Ellie had the powers, and that they would solve the crime together.
His silver-handled knife was similar to Lieutenant Wilkins because his grandfather was also a cop.
He had a vision of Melinda holding up the gold button, so he knew that it was important and held the answers to the mystery.
And since they've tied up that mystery, it's time for them to make out and end the book.
Now kiss. The end. And now a word from our sponsors.
Are you trying to communicate with a dead loved one? Do you have a cold case that needs to be solved? Would you like to know the future? Have you paid a fortune only to get vague and inaccurate predictions? Then come to the only psychics with a money-back guarantee. If our predictions don't come true in your lifetime, you're guaranteed a full refund. Call 740-229-9618. Our representatives are standing by. We know you want to.
Fear Street Mythos. We got these two mind readers here, right? Quote unquote mind readers. We got Brett/Brian. Just keep calling him Brian because we called him Brian for basically most of the in-depth plot. So we got Brian, and then we have Ellie. Both have visions, right? And Ellie's mother had visions. So she's got like some kind of like genetic component to her vision ability, right? And then you got this Brian guy. Now, their visions are not true mind reading. They're kind of like clairvoyant, sort of who knows what.
Bredian obviously has some mind reading capabilities, and he can find out her name, her phone number, her address, and her boyfriend stuff. So he does have the mind reading ability. Ellie is just like a medium, maybe?
Yeah.
Psychic.
But there is a hint that there's like a genetic, thing going on here because her mom had it, now she has it. So if the corporation is onto this, is there possibly a breeding program and the corporation is trying to get these two mind-reading people to get together in order for their kids to have enhanced mind-reading capabilities, right?
Like 11 from Stranger Things.
Right. We did have some thoughts like, okay, is the police department working with the corporation at all? Could they all be on the corporation payroll? And if so, knowing that Brian was intended to be with Ellie, did Wilkins keep him separate from his own daughter in order so that they wouldn't get together because Brian needed to get together with Ellie instead? Is it on corporation orders that whole shit went down?
I would think so. It makes sense. But the 2-year span, how did they know that he would get the visions to come back to Shadyside? Well, I guess the fact that they did a crap job just looking up his relatives, since he did cross state lines, is a federal thing, and since no one did anything about it.
Yeah, it's almost like at the same time that, he was technically a suspect, they're also kind of just like covering for him. He wasn't meant to be found. He was a fugitive on the run, but he wasn't really meant to be found.
Well, I just thought it was interesting that he went from a possible murder victim, and then they're like, well, we're still looking for him. And it's like, well, is he a victim, or is he a suspect, or what's going on?
He's a person of interest, as they say. That's the thing. When he's a fugitive, when he's on the run, they have leverage. They have power, right? They don't want him to actually get caught, but by having that leverage, they can more easily be able to manipulate him into the situation they want to manipulate him towards.
What's the deal with Wilkins, then, in this book? Because if he was working under the corporation's orders to try to keep them apart, and then he accidentally kills his daughter, and now this guy's back, and he knows the corporation needs this guy, do you think he's just going against the corporation in order just to seek revenge on him accidentally killing his daughter?
I don't know. He's probably a really complex character that is just not given any justice by this particular writing of the story. We don't see anything really from his point of view, and he probably has a lot going through his mind. Obviously he really loved his daughter. He didn't want her to die. That was unintended. To think that he was ordered to kill her by the corporation and carried out the orders, that would be pretty messed up. I don't think that's what happened.
I don't think he was necessarily ordered to kill her. I think he accidentally killed her following their orders of keeping Brett, Ian, and Melinda apart. Mm-hmm. But now, do you think they even told him why he had to keep them apart? Or do you think they just said, listen, your daughter can't date this guy, end this relationship now. But he doesn't know what's going on with Brett Ian. Yeah. So he has no clue, 2 years later.
I think he knew because he seems to accept Ellie's claims of having visions at face value and tries to use that to further whatever his own goals are. And he trusts that. So he doesn't go oh, that's crazy, you're a crazy kid. No, it's almost like he's not even surprised. He's like, yeah, of course you have visions. That's why we're setting this whole thing up.
But do you think the whole Bredian thing threw him off? Because he did seem surprised about Bredian's existence. He did want to kill him, which would go against what the corporation wanted.
Right. I mean, maybe he goes rogue. I'm not sure exactly
I
what
do
happens
think
there.
like he's so overcome with the grief of accidentally killing his daughter that he just is ignoring everything and has gone rogue and just wants to seek revenge the only way he can. Not only did this dude have weird mutant Professor Xavier powers, but this guy's the reason his daughter's dead. You know, you see it all the time in like the different X-Men shows. It's like, your mutant powers is the reason that my child's dead, even if it's like their own actions that cause their child to die.
Exactly.
So I think it's like that sort of blame game.
In relation to finding Bredian disappears for a while, and the police claim they're trying to use a new computer technology in order to try to track him down. Well, this is a little bit interesting, right? Because the first mention we have of the corporation is in relation to them having like this facility with all of this computer equipment, these big computer mainframes and stuff. The only facility of theirs that we've ever known about was in Missing. And as far as we know, this is the only corporation facility ever described in any of the Fear Street books so far. And that was basically what today we would call a data center, right? It had like a lot of computing going on. You know, is this another hint that the police at this point in time is working closely with the corporation? A lot of this theory hinges back on circling back towards Missing. After that book and that entire kind of cult is taken down, a lot of the cult members were police officers, and the police force ends up being, after that book, kind of like refreshed, like a whole lot of new people on the force. I guess whoever was left on the force would have had to either like fall in line with the new overlords or get the hell out of town.
I guess there is something to that. I do think that we are a few, maybe 2 years post Missing. The timeline has reset a few times though. I don't know how this like works with the whole timeline reset.
I don't know if it's 2 years or 4 years or like 5 years after Missing. It's hard to say.
But I guess in one of the timelines, Melinda dies.
Yeah.
Bredian has to run away. He leaves. And then that can explain why Sarah doesn't recognize him. Because we're like a few timeline resets and she no longer remembers what he looks like.
Yeah, or he said he changed his hairdo. So, that probably just explains everything. Let's talk about callbacks. I think the big one here is canoeing out to Fear Island. This is just like in the Canoe Adventure book, which was...
The Overnight?
The Overnight, yeah. There was another... What was the book where somebody was like actually canoeing on Fear Island and then the sister drowned or something?
Wasn't it the stepsister or something?
The stepsister, yeah. Yeah, so this keeps coming back. So we got callbacks to the stepsister. We got callbacks to canoeing to Fear Island in the Overnight. We're also getting some more mentions for Alma's Diner. I believe that was mentioned recently in a recent book.
Yeah, Alma's is the new place. Whatever happened to like Pizza or whatever?
Yeah, that's like gone. I mean, I guess it's still at the mall, but some kids like to hang out at the mall and other kids hang out at this new spot.
Whatever.
And the other thing that's been creeping up recently, this was, I think the first time Canyon Drive was mentioned was in one of the Reva Dalby stories, maybe?
I mean, I think it's been mentioned a few times.
Yeah.
I feel like Canyon Drive was even mentioned in the second book.
Was it really? I feel like it's just getting mentioned more and more recently. And this one kind of harkens back to, maybe this is more of a mythos thing, but this is going back towards the theory that Shadyside is located in Ohio. So the thing about Canyon Drive, right, is that if you look at where there are streets called Canyon Drive or Canyon Road or Canyon anything, geographically, the further west you go, the more and more of these that there are. And there's not as many further east. So in Ohio, there's several, including one right in R.L. Stein's hometown where he grew up. Meanwhile, if you look at Massachusetts, you can look on Google Maps. It's not really a thing in Massachusetts. So this is definitely not Massachusetts Shadyside. This is most certainly the Ohio Shadyside, the A site, as we like to call it. This little thing going on there. How about 90s things?
Well, we got some high school kids driving a Geo.
One of my high school friends had a Geo.
Except it wasn't the 90s. It was the aughts.
Well, it was the early aughts. Might as well have been the 90s. It was like 03, whatever.
So you put this one in. I didn't notice this one at all. Franks and Beans?
Apparently, this was once a common item on truck stops and diner menus. As you might imagine somebody driving down Route 66, pulling over at a roadside cafe, and he's, gonna order Frank and Beans. This is actually one of the first canned foods available in the U.S. since the 1850s, would you believe that? Recently, having been going to local eateries and diners and such over the last 20 or so odd years, I have not really seen this on any local menus. Perhaps this is a regional thing, but I guess they're just going out of style, so we're just going to put this under 90s things.
I feel like it sounds very much more like a Midwest thing.
In case you haven't figured it out from the name, it's just a hot dog that's been cut into pieces, mixed with beans, like a baked beans dish. Also, possibly a reference to On the Road by Jack Kerouac, where Frankenbeans comes up at one point. A little bit of a literary aside from R.L. Stein, showing his literary chops.
Well, I was going to say it's also referencing There's Something About Mary, but that's like a late 90s movie.
Yeah, it's kind of gone out of style. And you can tell it, right? The kids aren't the ones ordering it. It's like some old dude that stopped by. Microfiche. Here's an interesting one. Do you know the difference between microfilm and microfiche? The answer may surprise you.
Ooh.
Actually, microfiche is printed on flat sheets of film, and microfilm is on reels. R.L. Stein apparently also doesn't know the difference, since on page 56, he refers to Ellie dropping rolls of film back in a drawer after she's done viewing it, and if you remember, she actually used a microfiche machine. And she's dropping rolls, which implies microfilm. If anyone who's actually had experience using this kind of machine can tell us, maybe there were a type of machine in libraries that can read both, and maybe these were common in the 90s. If so, please let us know via Twitter, email, or YouTube comments.
Speaking of nitpicks, because that seems to be a nitpick, Ellie never actually reads anyone's mind the entire freaking book, and I feel like things would be very different if she were actually a mind reader. Like, we mentioned that Bredian can probably read minds, but he doesn't actually say he says, I read minds, I have visions, and it's like, well, those aren't the same thing.
Yeah, if either of them could read minds, they would know right away that Lieutenant Wilkins killed his own daughter, and then things would go very, very differently. Also, their relationship would have gone a lot differently, too, if they could read minds. I mean, honestly, like, how does a relationship go between two people that can read each other's mind? Like, I feel like it might not even work. I don't know.
Well, I mean, both Xavier and Jean Grey could read minds, right?
Did they bang?
No, but
okay, well, there you go.
But I'm saying they had, like, a mentor-mentee relationship. I mean, also, if you think about the Harry Potters, and you can just have, like, occlumency to, like, prevent people from reading your minds. I feel like if you're a mind reader, you'd be working on that, too.
They didn't get to go to Hogwarts. They didn't get to develop their powers to their full extent, so...
Well, okay, my next nitpick. How could Sarah not recognize Brett? He's not described as having any extra facial hair. In the picture that they show, he's not described as having facial hair. And Ellie, just by looking at the picture of Brett, recognizes that, oh my god, this is Brian. I'm sorry. Sarah has spent time with Brett. She's seen Brian. She, like, tried to talk him up in the diner, or almost. Excuse me?
So I have a theory that she's kind of out of it throughout a lot of the book. I think her dad is, like, actually drugging her. I think she's being drugged by her dad to keep her, like, kind of out of it so that she can't figure all this shit out.
That does make sense.
Yeah.
She is pretty...
I think you can tell whenever her meds are wearing off, she is, like, super
lucid.
manic.
I don't think she's super manic. I think she's getting lucid.
Yeah.
I think he's, like, knocking her out. I mean, that's the only way someone would not show up to work or school and not pick up the phone or answer the door.
Yeah, or how about when Ellie does break into her house, she'll start screaming as soon as she sees Sarah. Sarah wakes up and goes like, what the hell? They talk for a little bit, and then Sarah just falls back asleep. Literally with, like, somebody intruding in her house. So, like, what would happen if I was sleeping in my bedroom, right? And I'm just sleeping, I'm awoken by a noise, and there's a friend. Let's say my best friend is in the room. You know, aside from, like, okay, this is kind of weird, whatever. You know, we talk for a bit. What am I going to do? I'm going to be like, okay, now let me put on some clothing. Let's go downstairs. Maybe I'll, like, offer them food or, like, a drink, and then try to politely hint.
Get the hell out?
You should get the hell out. Yeah, exactly. Or, you know, if they need something, like, whatever. But whatever happens, what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to go back to sleep while they're still in my room. Because, A, now you're just being a bad host, right? You need to, like, offer your guests something. You need to be a good host. And B, you're falling asleep with somebody, like, still in your house that's, like, kind of uninvited. And also, like, just asking somebody to show themselves out is, like, a little bit rude. I don't know. It's just...
So I think Sarah is out of it.
She's out of it. I think she's being drugged by her dad,
but
basically.
She saw him before all this happened. Do you think she was being drugged her entire...
No.
It doesn't make sense.
Right, it doesn't
Why
make
wouldn't
sense.
she recognize him right away that very moment? Because
maybe she
the waitress.
did. Maybe she did, and she told her dad, and that's when he started drugging her. And she doesn't know to tell Ellie because she doesn't know that it's relevant. She might not know that Ellie and Brian are, like, seeing each other.
But
remember, it's only been, like, 2 days.
Wilkins wouldn't be able to put two and two together when she was like, have you heard of Brian, whatever the hell his name is? And he's like, what? And he seems really surprised.
Because he doesn't know he's going by Brian now. Because all his daughter told him is like, oh, Brett's back in town.
But she's the one that found out his name was Brian to tell Ellie.
Maybe he's not that good of a detective.
Maybe this book is just not that great.
The cops seem to have no control over the crime scene at the beginning, so they dig up this dead body and, like, literally half of Shadyside High is crowding around taking selfies with the corpse. Like, what's going on with that?
I mean, they're not taking selfies because they didn't have cell phones back then, but it's literally the middle of the night. First of all, why are all these kids here? Second of all, why are all these kids allowed here? Usually you've got tape, and then you force a perimeter, and you force people out, like...
Right, and also...
Where are the adults?
Sure,
also?
and they got the forensic techs there, the crime scene. Yeah, they got the crime scene technicians there, and they're, like, digging up the whole thing. How in the world did they not find the gold button? How did they not find it?
Or the knife.
And then days later, yeah, or the murder weapon. It's right there in the tree root, right next to the shallow grave. We got the knife right there. We got the gold button is literally, like, right under her dead body.
What you're supposed to do is block off an entire area, and then you grid it, and then so, like, each person you go through it as a grid.
Yeah. You know what's really common for these kinds of things? Or I would assume it would be, look, if I was running a CSI department, this is what I would do. I would bring something called a metal detector. Yeah, it's this really common thing that you can get off the shelf, and it doesn't cost much, and you literally just sweep the area and it goes beep whenever there's metal. So A, they would have found the knife, and B, they would have found the button, and C, that would have cracked the entire case right there because they could have swept the knife for prints, and they could have gotten the button to identify with the thing, and it would have been that would have been it. Open and shut case, as they say.
But also you even need a metal detector to do that because it was literally right there. It's like they were there in the middle of the night and then they just like went like, okay, we're only going to do this by light of flashlight, and once the sun comes up, we cannot come back to this scene. Like, that's not what happens.
Scenes like that remain closed for days. You know what should be a nitpick? The fact that Sarah and Brian/Brad and Ellie get to come back to that scene at all.
Yeah, I mean, you could plant that button there.
It's only 3 days later. That crime scene should still be secured.
What I was going to say is that, I don't even know if what they found can be valid because, first of all, you can plant that shit there. You can say, oh, no, it was planted there.
The CSI techs didn't secure the scene properly, so who knows, where that came from.
Exactly.
They didn't find it, so, it's not even valid anymore.
Yes.
Yeah,
and plus everyone's fingerprints are all over it.
Oh my god.
Doesn't even make sense.
It's freaking ridiculous. You know what the funniest thing is right here? It's just how incompetent the police are over and over again in this series. They keep getting everything wrong, and I don't know if it's gotta be like R.L. Stine.
Well, his story wouldn't make sense if they were actually, really competent now, would it? None of these stories would go anywhere. It'd be like, oh, okay. Open and shut. Done. So, another question. Why is Lieutenant Wilkins in charge of the investigation? It's his daughter. You can't be in charge of the case of your own daughter's death.
Right. There's a clear conflict of interest. It doesn't make any sense. That would just not happen unless they're, severely short-staffed and he's, the only, detective in the entire police force.
We've come across different detectives in this book series. I guess they just really wanted this case to go a certain way, the corporation, and he had to be in charge.
It's cheaper when you only have to buy off certain officers, right? Instead of buying off the entire police force.
I don't think they were buying him off at that point.
Moving on from, the implausibility of the crime investigation, even as Brian is acting super creepy towards Ellie, she can't help but think how cute he is. For example, when he's trying to get her into his Jeep and she calls him out for acting like a stalker.
So, why did you lie? Ellie demanded, not letting him off the hook.
He laughed. He even blushed a little.
Oh, he was so cute.
Come on, hop in, he urged. Or when he chases her down the streets and she falls and he falls on top of her, in the end, she just wants to kiss him and agrees to go on a date with him, even though literally she was just running for her life, basically.
I mean, I think we mentioned it throughout the in-depth plot. She's half creeped out and half turned on. Come on now. It's not.
Oh my god.
It's not a thing.
First of all, he's like college age, so like, how old is she now?
So she's 16 and he's college aged.
Yeah, that's messed up.
It's just all sorts of like problematic.
So, on their 4th day since they met, they decide to go on their date, and they paddle a canoe to Fear Island. It says they took turns paddling, but like, what?
You don't do that in a canoe. You both paddle.
Yeah, if one person paddles and then the other person paddles, it's just not gonna work too well.
And then it says that Ellie steered the canoe, but she was sitting in the bow.
Yeah, so if you're sitting in the front of the canoe like she was, you're not going to be able to really steer the canoe very well. It's actually very easy to steer the canoe from the back.
The stern.
Yeah, and it's really hard to steer it from the front whatsoever. In the front, you're going to be able to drive the canoe forward. So the front position, the bow position is kind of the motor, and the stern, which is in the back, is more of steering the canoe. It doesn't provide as much propulsion when you paddle, but it has a great effect on which way the canoe goes. And so R.L. Stine really seems to have it backwards here.
Well, it's because most people don't actually canoe. As they leave the island, Ellie is described as rowing with her paddle. It's a paddle. You paddle.
It's not an oar.
Oars, you row.
Yeah.
Paddles, it's in the name. Paddling. You know?
R.L. Stine, you got canoeing wrong. That's a paddling. Why would they take Brett/Brian to the courthouse to be booked in the middle of the night, like on Saturday?
Yeah, you could just take them to jail. I think you could put someone in jail for 36 hours or something with no charges. At that point in time, you don't take them to the courthouse, which wouldn't be open. You would take them to the police station. I guess this brings on a question of how much of what Lieutenant Wilkins, how much of what he said was actually true? Did he want Brett to get out to get Ellie to go to the button? Or what was did he plan for this?
So if he wanted to go rogue from the corporation, maybe he wanted Brett to escape and like kill Ellie and like ruin the corporation's plans. But like that just plays into the corporation's plans. So maybe he wanted him to escape in order to play into the corporation's hands and have them like get together. Like, I don't even.
Or when he was like, the neighbors heard a disturbance, so I came. And then my officers saw you guys go in the woods, so here I am. Like, maybe he was just following them.
Okay, yeah, so fact check. What would have happened IRL is like he would have just shot Brett/Brian and it would have been like over. You just shoot the guy.
That's another nitpick. He could have given Bredian the speech when he quote unquote took him to the courthouse. It doesn't make any sense if his end goal was to kill Bredian.
Yeah, he could have killed him so many times and he didn't kill him, and it makes no sense. Right at the end, he already confessed to the murder of his own daughter and he still wants to kill Brian/Brett/Bredian/Brienne.
Why didn't he do it earlier when there was no witnesses and he didn't have to like confess his crime to his daughter?
It would have been so much easier. It doesn't make sense.
That makes me question how much of what he said throughout the book was true, and then like what was his end game? Doesn't make sense. He apparently had no end game. The ending just doesn't make sense with like anything.
You know, we don't even know if he gets actually convicted of anything.
He wouldn't be because the crime scene wasn't secured, so I don't know. And also his prints are on the knife because he was there when it was found. So
yeah, so it's like one of those weird things where I don't think anyone's going to go to jail for his daughter's murder because there's not enough evidence of anything, and it's he said, she said, and a bunch of weird shit. Visions, right? Visions aren't going to stand up in a court of law.
Yeah, I mean, any good lawyer, once he gets a good lawyer, then we're like, well, he was stressed, it was like 4 a.m, and this crime scene was not secure. None of this evidence was like going to be able to be like used against him. It's all circumstantial, and you got this guy who was on the run for 2 years. Why would he be on the run for 2 years if he was innocent? That doesn't make any sense.
Exactly.
How does this girl know where anything is?
How would the uncle know it was Ellie's mom that reported him as the murderer of the child?
Like, why would they say, yeah, that's the lady?
Yeah, exactly. Witness protection, right? That's like a basic thing.
He was charged, and then they said there was not enough evidence, but it doesn't sound like she testified or anything. It just sounds like she gave a tip to the police, and then she was killed. How would he know it was her? Like, this isn't even like he saw her walking by. This is she went out of her way to go talk to the cops. There would be no reason for...
Yeah, so somebody from the cops was probably just leaked him the info.
That has to be it, right?
Yeah.
Like, there'd be no reason for for him to know that it was her.
Yeah, well, that's probably why the dad doesn't want Ellie to go to the cops, because he blames the cops for everything that happened, because clearly they leaked the information, they broke the trust, the confidentiality, which led to his wife's murder. He clearly distrusts them for that, and he's right to do so.
We know what the department was like before missing. Why would the police not send a police cruiser to Ellie's if her life was in danger? This is what makes me question the veracity of what Lieutenant Wilkins was saying. If her life was in danger, then shouldn't they send a police officer out to her? And shouldn't she have an escort to go back home?
Yep.
And shouldn't they have, like, increased patrols by her house?
It was so weird, right? They're like, you need to go to the police station for your own safety. And then they, like, had a short interview and just sent her back home. It was like, what? I thought they were gonna, like, give her protection. Get her a motel room and, like, an armed guard outside the door or something. Nope. Go back home, kid, and good luck. What the hell? And then, oh yeah, the neighbor called in a disturbance. What?
Wilkins also seemed to buy the mind-reading vision thing. He was just like, oh yeah, you have visions? Well, here's a picture. Look at this. What vision do you see? Get a vision now. And he's
well,
like...
Well, that was a mythos, I think, right?
I know, but it's just like...
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing was just Swiss cheese. It, like, totally falls apart, and it, like, doesn't make any sense.
Now that you've said that, out of 5 silver-handled knives, how many would you give this book?
I would give this book a 1/4 of a silver-handled knife. My main reason for doing that is because I would like to blame this book and lay, like, all of the responsibility for the fact that we haven't recorded an episode in so long concretely at the feet of this particular book. Put it all on this book and say, like, this is why. You know, we were really going strong, and then all of a sudden this book came along and it was like, what the heck is going on? First of all, the mind reader. There are no mind readers in the book.
False advertising.
False advertising. It's ridiculous. I don't know. I tried really hard with the prediction accuracy. I thought I really had it, and then, like, it wasn't even close. And that discouraged me.
You had such a great prediction. I was so jealous of it.
So, I don't know. Whatever. I didn't like it. One of the main problems with this thing is that he went back to the well with the bus trope. He kept ending chapter after chapter with these, like, suspenseful, like, oh my god, she's dead. Oh my god, she's about to get murdered. Oh my god, this thing is happening. How could it be?
I left some out. There was the one where she's going to the police station after Wilkins calls her and says Brett escapes, and her dad tells her to go to the car to start it while he, like, changes or something. So she goes to the car, and all of a sudden something lunges at her and, like, shoves her, and she gets really scared, and it turns out it's just Chaz. They forgot to bring him into the house. It's the dumbest shit. And there was, like, a few others where I was just, like, so tired of it. I was like, I'm not even putting it in.
There's so much bus.
It's a waste of time.
So much bus. It's ridiculous. So, yeah, he, like, doubles and triples and quadruples down on this whole bus thing. It's like, these jump scares, Arlstein, like, no. It just keeps getting worse. It's not doing anything for the book, and it's annoying. There were some highlights. There were some things I liked. The sort of reference to the beat authors of the 50s with the Frankenbeans. That was nice. I like the little callback with the canoeing.
Is that a reference to the Beats, or do you think it's a reference to, I don't know, Arlstein's childhood eating Franks and Beans?
I don't know. Anyway, I'll give him, like, a little bone for that. Chaz was great. Chaz was the shining star of this entire story, so I honestly, like, maybe I'll just upgrade this to half a knife, just for Chaz. Chaz is such a good boy.
I think I'll give it, maybe it's a broken, dull, tarnished knife. Just one at this point. I do love Chaz. I'm a dog person. I love dogs. I had a lot of the same issues that you did. You know, the buses were just unbearable. But I think I had a lot of issues with the love, lust, / like, fear and terror that she was, like, wavering between in terms of Brettian. That's not how people are in any way, shape, or form. If you're terrified of someone to the point where you need to run away, like, not the first time where she was nervous and, oh, I'm just a girl and he's a man and we can't be together, which, by the way, no, you shouldn't be together.
That's normal. That's normal reaction.
But, like, once it's like, he's so creepy, I need to get away from him, like, my skin is crawling.
He's peeling an apple. Peeling an apple made your skin crawl and made you run away for fear of your own life.
Trust your intuition and instinct and run away. We didn't mention this in the whole mythos nitpick thing, and I think that this is a valid thing. You know, he said he's a mind reader. Who's to say he's not a mind manipulator? You know, maybe Sarah was out of it in the same way that, do you remember in the Thrill Club where once their mind gets tampered with, they get really, really groggy. Like, who's to say that he didn't get Sarah to throw that button in later? That he didn't get Sarah to, like, throw that knife in later? You mean
when she was, like, way out of it in the woods earlier that night?
Exactly.
Yep.
Isn't it possible that he's a mind tamperer? And that would explain a lot, but he can't tamper with Ellie's mind because...
Oh my god. That night, he made her pull the button off her dad's uniform and keep it secret, and then later put it in 2 years later into the crime scene, all through mind manipulation. He's the one that done the dirty the whole time. Who knows? It's plausible.
I think it is plausible. I think we've hit something.
Wow, this should have come like much earlier during Mythos, but you know, sometimes you like have revelations when you have this frank conversation about the beans of the story. You come to some conclusions you wouldn't have come to otherwise.
There's something to that theory that he's maybe a really dangerous character, and his running away for 2 years thing is just kind of hilarious and ridiculous. Come on, R.L. Stine.
Well, maybe he can, like, you know, manipulate how other people see him.
And that's why Sarah couldn't recognize him in the diner. He's very Xavier-like. And you know what? I think this could have been a really interesting book in another way where, let's say it is just an X-Men type thing. They are being kind of like discriminated against, but like in a different way. Like they know they're different and they're like using their powers, but then like something comes to a head and the two of them split. It's sort of like in the Avengers or Captain America Civil War. Bredian and Ellie, like they're on the same team for a while, but then like Bredian is just doing all this evil crap and Ellie's like, what the hell, we can't do that. And then there's like a split.
Right.
Like it could be anything, but instead it was just like stupid. Weird relationships. What the hell are you writing? R.L. Stine, I know you have a son, but what the hell?
It's always interesting how he has a germ of a good idea and then he takes it absolutely nowhere.
And also, I think Sarah as a character is interesting as well. I mean, she's tragic. Her mom is gone. She tries to take up all her mom's tasks. Her dad still, like, hates her. You know, her sister is perfect, and all she wants is just her sister to get out of her life so her dad will pay attention to her. And suddenly her sister's missing and then dead, and now she, like, has this self-loathing because she's blaming herself for her sister's death, only to find out her dad is the one that murdered her sister. What is her life going to be like? Now, obviously her dad will get off because all this evidence can't be used against him, but like, now you have to live with the fact that not only with the self-loathing that she contributed to her sister's death in her mind, but her dad is actually a murderer, and like, what kind of family is she growing up with? And it would have been a really interesting story from like her point of view.
Who does she have at this point in her life? I mean, she's friends with Ellie. If Ellie just starts dating
her sister's ex-boyfriend.
Yeah. You know, that's going to make that relationship really awkward really fast. I don't know what other friends she really had at school. If she ended up befriending this, like, kid that just transferred over.
Yeah, she said she didn't really have any friends. So
that's brutal.
It's, like, really, really tragic. You're right. There's just, like, a crumb of a good story and interesting characters.
Or several.
But then it's just...
so many other angles this could have come at. It could have been the same exact story, change nothing, but come at it from a different angle, write it a little differently.
I mean, you can
elaborate on a couple of the things, and it could have been so much better.
You can have a similar story without the problematic relationship. She doesn't need to be creeped out by him, or she can be creeped out by him but not enter a relationship with him or not think about kissing him. Like, her only thoughts are either of her vision and the murder and how creepy he is, or how hot he is and how she wants to, like, bang him.
For a story that's written entirely from Ellie's point of view, with nothing written from anybody else's point of view, it certainly makes Ellie's point of view seem really, really kind of weird and disjointed. He often has everything from the main character's point of view, and most of his main characters are female, but this one is, like, particularly out there, where she finds herself falling for this potential murderer. And
she even thinks that he's a murderer.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh my god, is he saying Melinda because he murdered her?
Yeah.
Just make out with him.
Yeah, and then she just makes out with him, and it's just like...
And in that same scene, she thinks he's the one that, like, tried to pull her down underwater after she falls in.
His hand grabs at her ankle.
And pulls.
Yeah.
And she's like...
she doesn't know if he did it on purpose or if he was really just, like, trying to struggle for his life.
He says that he was struggling.
But she's not sure if she can trust him.
But then she's still like,
Makes up with him anyway.
Yeah.
And it's like, what is going on?
That's not, it's so
But again, and again, you could go into that and you could say like she has like a lot of hang-ups about her boyfriend from before, how she lost him, and maybe she's like really that messed up in the head that she would do that, but it doesn't go into that extra little bit of detail that would allow you to accept that.
Or what you could have is like just a scene of her wishing that like her mom was still around. Is like, this is something I could talk to my mother about.
Yep.
You know, I wish I had a woman to talk about this with. Like,
Yeah, because your dad's not around very
and he
much.
doesn't want to talk about this crap.
No. There could be ways where you could explain it away, right? You could make it believable, and you could make her a tragic character, much the same way we just described Sarah as being tragic, and have you, like, have the reader feel empathy, feel compassion for her, instead of just judging her choices and going like,
what are you doing?
Crazy. It's just missing, like, a sentence here, a paragraph there, a little bit of extra little salt.
It also makes them very
seasoning.
Stupid. You wonder about them, and you wonder about their intelligence and their common sense, because it's not normal. It's not, nothing they do or say is in the realm of our universe.
I mean, that's also another angle that he could have pursued. It could have just been like a teens be stupid story. And that's fine, because teenagers do be stupid.
I was stupid.
I was mad dumb when I was her age, but the thing is, you have to write it like that. You have to get us into the, okay, yeah, no, this is just teens being teens. They be dumb. Okay. It's almost there, I guess, but it's just not quite, and you still end up ridiculing them.
We started this episode with me reviewing Red, White, Royal Blue, and I had said, like, you know, it's not realistic, it's not in the realm of realism, it's very fantastical, because, like, you wouldn't see things like that happening in the real world without the repercussions, etc., etc. But I said it was okay, because in the world that the author had created, everything that was happening was believable. R.L. Stine hasn't created a world where any of this is believable.
He's trying to write a book in 2 weeks and get paid for it, too. Yeah, I get it.
Every vision she has is actually like an R.L. Stine bus. And that's on top of all the other buses that he has in this book. Is she being murdered by Bredian? No, it's just Chaz, like, licking her face. Is it a dead body? No, it's just someone taking a nap. These aren't, like, what are you doing? I feel like every chapter ended with something, and you're just like...
It was the most bus-heavy book I have read thus far in the Fear Street series. It was pretty ridiculous.
I did not like this book. I liked Chaz, though. Give me a good dog, and that will, like, bump any book up.
Is that how you got an entire knife? I mean, I bumped mine from, like, a quarter to, like, a half. So what was your original one before the Chaz bump?
I judge on a Fear Street scale. So it's still not the worst Fear Street book I've ever read.
They don't all have dogs.
That's exactly true. They don't all have good dogs. An off-leash dog running after squirrels and staying on a canoe when everyone's in the water. Come on now.
Having said all of that, I sincerely hope that the next book, Fear Street, The Dead Lifeguard, will be much better, and we will find it a lot more enjoyable.
Well, why don't you describe the book?
So, on the cover, we have Fear Street Super Chiller. Oh boy! It's a super chiller by R.L. Stine, The Dead Lifeguard. No one can save her now. And on the cover, we have a male lifeguard with a whistle around his neck, standing knee-deep in the water, with a far-off look in his eyes, holding the unconscious, limp body of a blonde female lifeguard wearing a one-piece bathing suit, also with a whistle around her neck. I'm just going to critique the cover a little bit here. So she's supposed to be unconscious, but actually her neck muscles seem to be slightly engaged because it's not like hanging straight down. It's kind of just like almost horizontal. And he's supporting her torso kind of like right in the middle of her back. And the other hand is like holding her like under the knees, which is, you know, normally how you support a human body. So you think if she was really unconscious, her head would just be hanging more down at a more severe angle, and she's really not. It seems like a conscious person being held rather than an unconscious person being held. Now, I just want to go in a little bit more into this lovely cover. There's a person in a beach chair looking really frightened, and then there's another person that is looking really chill, also in a beach chair. And it's this, like, man wearing a Speedo with, like, a big, hairy chest and stomach. And he's got his hand up, and looks like he's about to take off his aviators to get a closer look as to what's going on in the pool. But he looks completely calm and relaxed. And he's holding what appears to be a beer in his other hand. I like that little detail from the author. It's kind of funny. For prediction accuracy, I think this is going to be about one of the lifeguards, a male lifeguard, let's say. Harkening back to the most recently released season of Stranger Things, there's going to be a male lifeguard that is going to be going after some of the other lifeguards, specifically a female lifeguard at the pool. So murder weapon will be drowning, murderer gender will be male, victim gender will be female.
Well, I've already read the book, but I wrote my predictions beforehand. For me, I said that it's summer vacation and beach time. There's a possessed lifeguard killing fellow lifeguards, because I also thought of Stranger Things Season 3. They're dying in droves, and now it's affecting the people vacationing and wherever they are. So I said the murder weapon would be, like, there'd be a myriad of weapons because there's going to be multiple victims. So I said there'd be drowning, there'd be blunt force trauma, the works. I said the murderer would be male, but they'd have victims of both genders.
Well, now that our predictions are set in stone, never to be changed again, I look forward to seeing all of you dear listeners again soon. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Rhett Read Podcast.
Join us again as we continue our journey down Fear Street.
We love hearing from you guys, so feel free to reach out to us at Rhett Read Podcast on Twitter and Facebook.
Email us at rhett.read.podcast@gmail.com.
Don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe.
Once again, thanks for listening. See you again soon.